All right, this is a video response to Northern Exile, who I'm assuming is maybe Scottish, but who knows? Maybe he lives in Yorkshire or something. Regardless, he definitely sounds European or UK or whatever. And he has made a couple of videos, not bad videos. I actually quite enjoyed watching them about Trench Crusade. But the problem is, he's really wrong about some basic stuff. And being a American, I feel the need to correct this guy because, I just took my glasses off, but because actually, see, the things he complains about, and I'm not going to show his whole video, I'm just going to, paraphrase some things, is how there's no hope, there's no whatever, why would anybody fight, what are you even fighting for, etc., right? And that is very much, I guess, the typical European atheist point of view, because our poor European brothers have just had all the fight beaten out of them over the last 50, 60 years. uh, you know, they've turned their back on their Christian faith, and they basically have submitted themselves to this weird kind of subjective logic, which is not logic at all. If you say nothing is true, then what kind of world do you even live in, right? Certain things are absolutely true. There's a reason I'm going where I'm going here, okay? So bear with me, right? So the argument first, he doesn't like the miniatures. Well, that's fine. I mean, that's 100% fine. You don't like the miniatures, you don't like the miniatures. Fair complaint, fair dinkum, and you don't have to play. I mean, if you think 40K makes better miniatures, that's up to you. Me personally, I think Trench Crusade miniatures are better, mainly because I make all of the Trench Crusade miniatures that I play with for the most part. The vast majority of them are heavily kit bashed miniatures, either from the Flagellant box set, from Warhammer Fantasy, or stuff I've 3D printed and did head swaps and weapon swaps. And so while I do own some of the more official figures, like, I've got this casketer, but if you look in his hand, he doesn't have a flail. He's got an anti-tank hammer, right? Because that's what I do. I love to modify figures. And if you're like, here we've got a old world Flagellant, except he's got a Mosin Nagant in his hand. And depending on how you paint him, and if you put a demonic or Christian icon on him, he could be a heretic or a trench pilgrim. Just really depends on how you want to paint him up, right? And then here I've got some Byzantine troops. This one's armed with a pistol and a trench club, and he's got his bedroll on. Yeah, this is not a trooper this is not a Trench Crusade troop. This is a Byzantine imperial troop, like a Varangian, except with modern equipment, which I love because, I can play New Antioch, but instead of using the New Antioch figures, I can use these Byzantines and play out a whole campaign where the Christians from Russia and other places in the north are trying to liberate Constantinople. That's, in my opinion, just super cool. It's super cool that that ability exists for me, that I can do that, right? Now, moving on, though, the other thing is, okay, why would you even fight? Well, I mean, that is like, that is a really silly thing to say. And this is what leads me to believe that I must be dealing with your typical EU, Euro, atheist type guy, is because um, obviously you're fighting because hell has arrived on earth and wants to drag you down with it and use you like a fleshlight. So your option is to buck up and hit the battlefield to put an end to this nonsense, or die coward and probably go to hell. That's your options, right? So that being the options, um, what do you need to convince you to fight against being, abused in the most horrible ways you can imagine by forces literally from hell? And he keeps saying that, like, why would you fight? Why would you fight? Well, again, because maybe being whipped no end by a bunch of demons isn't your cup of tea, and you're going to fight to the bitter end against evil because you're not a atheistic poussoir who is already going to hell anyway, unless you correct your BS, right? And that's the thing, and I think that's why a lot of people talk about how this game, the designers and everyone are very liberal, and they actually don't like Christians, and they especially don't like conservatives, maybe, even though I've heard that the game designer himself is a conservative. Um, my response is, well, that makes very little sense because they basically designed a game that is absolutely 100% sure to appeal to, and I've said this before, the most conservative and Christian members of the war game community, right? Like 40K appeals to a lot of Christians and conservatives because you can see who they are. They're generally playing Space Marines or Imperial Guard. It is what it is, right? And if you've got a problem with that, well, that's on you. But this is a game where you can play as a Christian, make a Christian army, and literally battle it out with demons for, all in the name of Christianity, Christ, good, whatever. I mean, this is the most Christian game ever designed. And even though I'm sure that there's probably whole Reddit threads where the idiots on Reddit or in their Discord are trying to, argue how the forces of hell are better. They're actually the good guys. Those people are crazy people that I would not leave alone in a room with small children or anything, because that is obviously an insane take. The demons from hell are actually the good guys. Now, think about that. Anyone who actually non-ironically says such a thing to you, yeah, you need to go ahead and distance yourself, because that is a crazy person and they have severe problems. And you don't want to be around the kind of person that's going to kidnap your 5-year-old and sacrifice it to a demon because they are so, misguided. So here's hoping that the creators of Trench Crusade don't try to screw things up and just leave the game as it is, which is a battle between the forces of heaven and the forces of hell. If they leave it alone and they don't try to be too disrespectful to Christianity, Some people might have a problem with the Metachrists and stuff. I mean, personally, I do. I think it's stupid. The idea that you could ever clone Jesus and create, monsters using, you know, the blood of the body of Christ, which would not actually have anything to do with Christ, since Christ is part of the heavenly Father, etc. But whatever, that's something they decided to do, and it's something I'm willing to overlook since my warband doesn't believe any of that nonsense anyway. That is one thing the creators did, is they added an out for people playing Trench Pilgrims who can just say, I'm playing this order of Trench Pilgrims and I don't believe in any of the new stuff that the church is saying. I believe it's all heretical, etc. So basically orthodoxy. And so there's that. But see, I digress, and I'm sorry. I wanted to keep this relatively short. So I've got about 4 minutes left to talk, I think. Here is the deal, Northern Exile. Yes, the people fight because it is beneficial to fight evil than it is to surrender to it. Something that, the UK knows a lot about, surrendering to evil. And on top of that, if you take to battle against the forces of hell and die, from a Christian point of view, you will be martyred and immediately be accepted in heaven, right? But if you don't fight and you bend the knee to the demons, then when the final trumpet blows and the archangels ascend and the J-Man comes back for his second coming, you will be going to the hot place, right? So from any point of view, but especially a Christian point of view, it is far preferable to die in battle against the forces of hell than to live to see the end times as a coward. Because, yeah, you're screwed at that point. It's just the way it is. You chose to stand by and not do anything. And now, your host. It is what it is. You will be stood in front of the Son, and he will look at your life and he'll notice that when given the choice to stand and fight against hell, you chose to be a coward. And he will say those famous words they say in the Bible. If you haven't read it, I suggest you do. I do not know you, which is his nice way of saying you get to go to hell because I don't know you. You're not a servant of mine, right? But the men, even if they were sinful men who take up the cross and give their lives defending the civilians in the rear from yoke fiends and demons and praetors and shit like that, and die when they are faced to Christ and they say, Lord, Lord, I died, in your name defending the people. Jesus will look at them and say, come on in, brother. You see, that's what Northern Exile is not understanding. And of course, like I said, I'm blaming it on the fact that he's an atheist and he's probably been raised his whole life to think the way he does. But if he knew anything about Christian thought, Christology, as some people call it, and demonology, he would understand the importance of fighting against hell and the rewards that go along with fighting against hell. Now, is it going to be terrible? I mean, are choristers going to sing songs that make you bleed out of your ears? Are death commandos going to creep into your foxhole at night and murder you in horrible ways. Yes. Yeah. It's going to be horrible. But at the end of it all, when you're standing in front of the Lord and you're being held to account for what you did in this life, you will be able to say that you fought bravely in the name of Christ against the very actual forces of hell. So I don't understand his confusion about it. So there you go. Ending it. Peace and love. Remember, it's better to die for Christ than to live for the devil.